Hey community, welcome to our sermon podcast for wanderers, seekers, and thinkers, for deconstructing and reconstructing. This is a feed of Open Door Church, a faith community focused on God's love and grace, a progressive church built around action, community, and people. Enjoy this week's message and check back often as we're posting new content every week. So this next month, we're going to unpack some values or themes or threads that is part of sort of what we're trying to do here at Open Door. And we're launching with Journey because it's such a critical piece. When I talk about who Open Door is, I almost always start here in talking about we have people from every different place in life and at different points along their journey. And one of the things that we're trying to do is figure out, well, how do we form a community around people in completely different places? And so the values, or forming our community around values, has sort of been that conversation. So we're gonna start here and then have those conversations as we go along. You might have seen values listed on our website, and we've basically been working to update and make and sort of reaffirm, is this fit with what we're talking about? Is this really what we're driving at? Is this the core of who we are? That sort of thing. So Journey brings with it all kinds of great cliches. And we're going to try to use all of them today. Here's the deal, but the reality is those cliches are a lot of them are really good and helpful reminders for us. I grew up in a tradition, and I'm going to be pretty blunt and probably overly harsh, just for what it's worth, just so you know that I'm coming at it from an extreme point of criticism. I grew up in a tradition that believed baptism was the moment of salvation. So we had all kinds of conversations. You can study the Bible. You can talk about faith. Accepting Jesus into your heart, was like a 4-letter word in my church. Like we don't just accept Jesus into our heart, because the follow-through was baptism, and it's a moment when that's the moment the Holy Spirit enters. That's the moment. We can unpack the theological problems with all this later. If you want to do that with me, I'd love to. Not here, not now. But the follow-through was baptism, and that was the moment. And whether or not the senior leaders or long-standing people in that tradition would have talked about it this way, growing up in that experience, the knowledge of what happened at baptism was the destination. And the statement that journey is the value for us is a statement that faith is not, you ready? It's not about the destination, it's about the journey. But the reality is that's how I viewed it, is that there was this point in time in which I reached that moment, which for a child is a bit ridiculous for me to feel like I've reached some sort of special moment as a child. But the process doesn't ever end. And there's a few things to unpack here. First of all, we're not getting somewhere. There's not an end point at which we've arrived at faith, or which we've arrived at what we're trying to do. There is only incremental success. For those of you that are goal-oriented, checklists, anyone? Yeah? A few of us? Okay. My apologies. There's no checklist that solves this thing, and the goal is not a checkable goal. It is simply about the daily process of growing, of thinking, of questioning, of discovering, and it doesn't stop. There's a reason that people spend entire lives studying or thinking or doing something very specific, very detailed, maybe one book of the Bible their entire life, or one specific practice of prayerful meditation, or one specific labor of work that leads them closer to God. There is a reason that they can do that their entire life and never reach the destination. It's because it's much bigger than that. The second piece we're going to unpack this morning is that journey, we're all along the path. And for most, if not all of us, they are different paths. They are our own paths. We explore God in this practice, or in this type of service, or in this type of thinking, or in this type of reading, or in this type of prayer. We discover God in all different places. For some of us, nature is the most horrific place to find God because of all of the stress and anxiety that it brings with it when we're out there. For others, that is the only place we can experience God. That's because we're on our own journeys, and when we read the Bible, when we have conversations about who God is and what we're supposed to be doing, it leads us into different places because we come with different experiences and different backgrounds, and all of that is good. In fact, it's part of what makes us who we are when we come together and have conversations and grow together and support one another, even though we don't understand how you could possibly meet God in this place or in that place, but we can support and grow and learn together. That's what community is about. That's what church, can we say, should be about. You can't read enough Bible, theology, scholarship, whatever. You can't learn enough. You can't do enough prayer or service to reach that end goal. And we are all finding different ways to get where we think we should be going. The Bible is one long book of journeys. Literally, that is the story that is told. And we ourselves tell our own stories, and we think about our own life in a way of journey. We might use a different word. We might tell different stories. We might begin with our academics. Well, I went to this school, and I went to this high school, and then we lived in New Orleans for a few years. If you didn't put on your resume where you went to high school, it's because you weren't from New Orleans and you didn't belong in that job that you were trying to apply for. There are points along our journey, and we tell our story and who we are based on these different journeys. And all of that says something about the type of humanity or whatever, the type of people that we are. It's not specific to Open Door or to the Lower Mainland or to Canada. People, humanity, Homo sapiens, we are storied people. We are people that journey and that tell our story through journey, that identify who we are through the journey. So it's no coincidence that the Bible begins with a journey and closes with a journey. It is journey after journey after journey. So we're going to look just briefly, because when we start reading through Scripture, we can start with Genesis 1, whatever, but 1 through 11, let's just set it aside. You can ask me why later. But we begin chapter 12 with the story of Abraham. And I just want you to hear how the narrative of God's people begins, okay? So chapter 11 is a long list of descendants, and Tower of Babel before that, and then on, right? All of those really strange stories, the flood, Adam and Eve, all those are those first 11 chapters. Chapter 12 begins with Abraham. This is how it starts. You ready? Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you." Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. Where's he headed? Somewhere. A land. Just go. Abram hears a call from God, and the call is, go to a place that you will learn about. The entire story of God's people begins with a call to just go and to be on the journey. And there's a destination set, a land that I will show you. But we don't know what that looks like. He's not told. For Abram, right here, right now, the answer is, am I going to respond to God telling me to be on the journey or not? Am I going to say yes, or am I going to say no? And that's it. He has no control over what that's a different story. He has no control over what the outcome is or where he's supposed to be going or anything like that. And he's going to encounter all kinds of things along the way. All the request is go. Go on this journey. The story of who God is consistently wrapped in the story of journey. So we spent a lot of time in Exodus over the last few months with Shalom. The story of Exodus and the story of Moses leading these people out of the land is a story of leaving and wandering to a place that I'm going to show you. And along the way, Abraham and Moses and the Israelite people meet God, encounter God in different ways on the land through moments with divine interaction with mountains and storms and people. But the story is about the journey and how God is involved in that journey. And our faith is the same thing. And our community is the same in that we are on a journey. I started here just over 8 years ago now. And I had a lot of ideas about what I thought this place should look like. And we spent the first year talking and meeting and having lots of brainstorming sessions, and we did this process where we looked at the gifts and talents of the church and the needs of the community and our passions as a church, and said, where do all these things intersect? And we spent a lot of time discerning, and I spent a lot of time discerning. We are not where I thought we were supposed to be going. I had an end point in mind, but community doesn't work that way. Church shouldn't work that way, but often it does. Often it is simply a singular vision that we're trying to get to this point, and we're going to dump the money and the resources and whatever it is into that to make sure we get to this success point. Maybe it's number of people in our seats. Maybe it's number of donations. Maybe it's number of community members engaged. Maybe it's the number of baptisms. Whatever it is, we often set a success point and say, this is what community is. But the reality is, the journey shouldn't look that way. And if journey is part of our value system, that we're each in support of one another in the process of faith and life, then things look different when we get to where we thought we were trying to go. And we're in a different place than I expected, which I think is a good thing. When we move into the New Testament, Jesus is on a journey. The stories are told in the same way. There is There is movement. Things take place in different communities. In Luke, the first 8+ chapters are spent essentially in and around Galilee. And Jesus is moving from town to town, but it's all in a central kind of area. The next 10 chapters, Luke is 24 chapters. 10 of those chapters happen on the journey from Galilee to Jerusalem. Even the story of Jesus' work and ministry happens through the process and understanding and framework of journey. And the next step, of course, the church is called to go from Jerusalem and out. You look at Paul, you look at Philip, you can look at these different evangelists that are going from church to church on a journey consistently, finding their way away from and back to Jerusalem on this journey as they encounter churches, as they work with others, as they encounter God through process of their journey. I want to look at one specific story this morning. This is the third time I've done this story in, as we just said, 8 years here. And it's one of my favorites because it reveals so much about what is supposed to be happening. And Jesus flips it upside down, and so we have this moment of things being turned over, but we also have this moment of realization that we don't understand completely what we're going and headed toward. And this moment of destination seems to be fleeting, and journey seems to be taking hold for these few people. So we're in Luke chapter 24. And I'm going to read for a minute, and I'll just let you sort of engage it however you like to hear and engage and think through. The story will set the stage for you. You don't have to worry about where we are in the story because I think it'll make sense. Luke chapter 24, verse 13. Now on that same day, 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place in these days?" He asked them, "What things?" And they replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him." And he, Jesus, said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophet had declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into the glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in the Scriptures. What I love about this story is that these guys had it down. Okay, we don't know these guys. One of them, this is the only time we hear of him. The other doesn't even have a name mentioned. But they're not strangers. I don't know if you caught that, but they're not strangers. As he's telling this story to Jesus, he says, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb this morning. These are inner circle people. The women of our group were at the tomb. They came back to where we were gathered. These are people hanging out with the disciples, right? These are not, I mean, they don't have names, but they're not no-name people. They are inner circle people hanging out with the disciples, and have these women go and they come back, and then others that they know go and come back and didn't find them. And in a few verses, it's going to tell us again, that same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. These are inner circle people. They know what's going on. They know what's supposed to be happening. But their interpretation of all of the events are simply that what we thought Jesus was supposed to do, the end point, the solution to everything, the destination, was that something, the redemption of Israel, was supposed to happen. Now here's the expectation. It's a political expectation. God's going to redeem Israel by placing a king back on the throne and giving Israel their land and their authority and their kingship back. There was a destination in mind. So someone who's been traveling with, on the journey with, learning from, experiencing Jesus in the flesh, has missed the point entirely and is now being explained and understanding that you encounter God, you encounter Jesus on the journey, not at the destination. Beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. And as they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening, and day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. And when he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed it, and broke it, and gave it to them. We did that this morning. And then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. At the communion table, well, the dinner table in which they break bread, share community, they experience Jesus and see him in the flesh. This is the process. This is the laying out for us what church and community looks like. This journey where you encounter God, where Jesus is revealed through intentionality, through purposeful expression. And in the moment of breaking of bread, of sharing community, of doing journey together, it is revealed to them that Jesus is with them and present in this moment. They were on a different journey than they thought. And it was good, and it was okay, and it was wonderful, and they were able to support one another, and they were able to break bread together. And at the end of that, hopefully, there's a recognition that where they thought they were going and where they think they are going now may not be the same. But the journey, the process of experiencing God, of sharing that experience, and of learning who God is and how God works, and then relearning that, is the process of faith and discipleship and understanding and community. At the end of this, they said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together, and they were saying, "The Lord has indeed risen, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. Do you hear what's happening? Each of these people have gone their separate ways, have experienced Jesus in moments along their own journey and their own path and in their own way, and then they've come back together and they've told stories about how God has been working in their life. Tell me that's not church. Tell me that's not what we're doing when we say journey is at the heart of what we are. They gathered together and they told and shared stories. I find it interesting also that they didn't recognize along the path. But after, they say to each other, wasn't it, how did he put it? He says, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us along the road?" There's a recognition that something was weird, and we felt it and we knew it, but we didn't identify it then. But as we look back and things become clear, I can identify in my story, in my journey, the ways in which God has been working, and I can now share that insight and that experience with others in ways that I couldn't in the moment. Fred Craddock says about the journey, he says, we can anticipate what's coming. But it's like, maybe this is going to happen, as Zagam shared this morning. Maybe this is going to happen. It's in the distance. I'm not sure. Something is there. And then in the moment, it happens so quickly and so chaotically maybe that we can only see and experience pieces of it. And then he says, and then we have the experience in remembering. So we have the rehearsal of what's coming, the experience of it as it happens, and then the remembering. And in the remembering, we can analyze, we can pick apart, we can see God working in ways that we could never see in the midst of that experience. Storm, excitement, joy, presence of God, all of those things. And then we come back as we do community and we share in our journeys. And we might experience God in very, very different ways. But the sharing of it is the community. It is the church. They found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told what happened on the road and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. Part of church is having those stories that we share together, that we don't necessarily understand all of those journeys and all of those experiences, but we can support one another in the process. The communion table at Open Door is unique, not as in we're the only ones, but as in it's special, because each week somebody different shares their experience and their knowledge and their understanding of God from that table. We may or may not agree, but we can support and learn from and grow together through that experience. That's part of sharing our journey together that we practice every week. Thanks for listening to this sermon podcast from Open Door Church. Our intro and outro music was created by Lee Rosevere and is used under a Creative Commons by attribution license. Have a great week. Ask the hard questions and explore God's love. Everyone is always welcome to join the journey with us at Open Door. Learn more at opendoorfamily.ca. That's opendoorfamily.ca.